Most GIS professionals start their journey in desktop software, and while a lot of attention goes to proprietary tools like ArcGIS, there's another platform that's open source, incredibly powerful, and central to modern GIS learning and practice, and that tool is QGIS. It's where many people create their first map, run their first spatial join, and increasingly it's the bridge connecting traditional GIS workflows with modern cloud-native tools. But like every technology, QGIS has strengths and weaknesses. So in this video, let's break down exactly what QGIS is, why it matters, when you should and shouldn't use it, and how it fits into the future of modern GIS. So if you're not familiar, QGIS is an open source desktop GIS application for data visualization, editing, and analysis. And if this is your first time hearing about GIS, let's break down those terms a little bit for you. Open source means that it is an open project, that the code base to build this project is open. Anyone can look at it, duplicate it within reasonable terms, and actually contribute to it, which a lot of people do. In fact, there's no central body that maintains the code to QGIS. There is actually a foundation that oversees that, and many contributors with different levels that have contributed, significant amounts of code to the project over the years. They maintain the vision for this project. You can see that here on their website, a little bit about QGIS and what it is and who builds it. And as an open source foundation, different individuals, as well as companies and organizations contribute funding to keep the project moving and alive. Now, desktop GIS means that it runs on your computer. Now, you can run it in the cloud, but it's basically doing the same thing you would on your computer. There aren't a lot of advantages to running it in the cloud. So most people run it and download it from the website and run it on their computer. A GIS application, if you're not familiar, it means Geographic Information Systems. So that allows us to work with geographic or geospatial data directly on our computer. Now, there are many things that QGIS can do. It can do data visualization, create maps, add layers, things like that. You can actually edit your data within it, and you can do analysis on geospatial layers, both including vector data, which is points, lines, and polygons, as well as raster data, which is imagery or derived imagery from the Earth. Now, in the intro, you heard me kind of compare it to ArcGIS. Now, ArcGIS is the proprietary system that is maintained by a company named Esri that's been around for many different years. And a lot of the functionality is very similar between the two systems. Of course, Esri has an ecosystem of products around it that are maintained by them as well. And you can connect and use those to serve things like map layers, connect to different databases, and things like that. Now, QGIS is its own project, but it has a very similar ecosystem of different things it can connect to. It can connect to databases like PostGIS, connect to data stores in the cloud. You can push map layers and projects to web-based maps, and it has a lot of other extensions, which we'll get into in a minute. But for the most part, you need to know it can support nearly any geospatial data type. It's built with best-in-class open source projects underneath the hood to read and work with those data sets, so it's very efficient for reading that data and doing some basic processing as well. Now, what's also important is that it's cross-platform. It can work on any computer, be it Linux, Windows, or Macintosh, and allows you to extend to all these different things. So it's not limited in the same way that ArcGIS is, which primarily runs on the Windows platform. And I mentioned plugins, which is a really important concept within the QGIS world. QGIS has a core functionality within it, but there's all these plugins maintained by lots of different people, and anyone can build them, that you can add in to QGIS to extend it to do things like web mapping, machine learning, add layers from different data sources. You name it, there's probably a plugin for it. And that's probably one of my favorite parts of QGIS. It has so many different ways to extend it and use it from different ways. So with that, you can kind of think of it as a Swiss Army knife of GIS. And even if this is your first time interacting with geospatial data, it's actually fairly easy to get started, just dragging and dropping data. I have a full tutorial right up here. If you want to get started with QGIS, that'll help you do the basics and go all the way to doing some more advanced analytics as well. Now, why should you care about QGIS? So importantly, it's accessible and free. It's not a proprietary GIS, which means that anyone can download and use QGIS. You go to their website, download it, install it, and you're up and running. There's no licenses or anything like that, and that is one of the downsides, which we can talk about in a minute. But for right now, I want to continue to talk about some of the key advantages of the system. It's also community driven, right? Since there's no central company maintaining the vision, that means that the steering committee within QGIS kind of maintains the vision of the project and kind of sees where it's going to go. And these are experts in all different kinds of fields that decide kind of the high level vision of where it should go. It also means that all these plugins that come around that can do a lot of different things. You have have different tutorials and user contributions, all these different things that allow you to do a lot to scale it and use it in so many different ways. It's kind of like you're tapping into this massive resource of individuals contributing to that, since you don't have to rely on like one single organization to do everything for you. You can kind of divide and conquer within this community. It also has all these modern connections, right? So most people get started by pulling in files, be it shape files or GeoJSONs or GeoTIFFs, whatever it is, to just load data into QGIS. But once you level up, you can actually connect into things like PostGIS. It's just a database for storing geospatial data and manipulating it. If you want to learn more about that, there's a video here. You can connect into analytical tools like DuckDB to actually process and do some local analytics data right on your computer. You can even connect into cloud services like storage in S3 and Google Cloud Storage, and modern data formats like GeoParquet, Cloud Optimized GeoTIFF, spatiotemporal asset catalogs. It's a lot of terms to throw at you, but there's a lot of different ways to connect in. It's like this really nice bridge to everything that's out there. And what I think is really strong about it is its visualization platform. If you see and kind of look in the interface, the map is kind of like the big center part, so you can quickly see the data, you can validate it, you can make edits, do quick exploration, load projects, turn them on and off and stuff like that. And once you've actually built your project, you can save that and the data underneath it and share that with any other QGIS users. So they basically have the same files and everything that goes with it. You can share that with them and they can load that in and see the same exact project. It's not perfect because you have to package everything up, but it's very interoperable to move between different users and things like that. The core functionality in QGIS is also top-notch. There's really simple tools for automating workflows. You can create what's called like model building, where you can create different steps in your analysis and save that as an analysis output and repeat it so you're not clicking over and over and over. You can connect into different things like network analysis, raster analysis. You can connect into GRASS, which is a really great tool for doing processing. I could go on and on about the things that are already in QGIS. There's a ton of stuff packed in there. I mean, it's a really strong package to getting started and doing lots of different analysis. And really, it's a foundational tool, right? I think of it kind of as this central hub that connects out to many different things and allows you to really plug in all of these different places and tools. So even if you're just getting started with basic data, know that you have the right tool to connect into modern and traditional geospatial and GIS data sets and different tools and things from around the web. So now, do you need to use QGIS? And evaluate this on 4 different levels. So the first one is personal projects. And like, yes, yeah, I would 100% use this. It's free, it's open source, it has a ton of features. You can learn and experiment. It is the perfect entry point for anyone getting started in GIS, and even more advanced users to have that central hub. I use it on a regular basis to open and explore data, even connect to other data sets. It is the thing to do to get started to do that. So personal projects, 100%. And one-off projects, again, it's great for data cleaning and visualization. It's like very easy to install and get started with. If you're using and you just want to stay within a different ecosystem, like if your whole workflow is in Python or something like that, you can stay within that. You might not need QGIS for that, but if it's just a very basic project to get started, QGIS is a great part to get started with that. Now, for small teams, it's another very ideal tool to have in a toolkit. If you're working with a small group, be it you're a non-governmental organization, you're a researcher, you're a consultant, and you're just getting started or exploring this, like once again, you can download it for free and do that. The downside here is that if you need to share data or things across that, you will need like a central place to store your data, be that in cloud storage, be that in a database somewhere. And you want to be able to have some kind of controls over that. When you think of teams, data infrastructure starts to become important. QGIS doesn't necessarily provide data infrastructure out of the box, so that is on you to do that. And again, QGIS doesn't have like a support team that you can call if you need someone that you can contact. There are companies that actually provide this service around the world to be like your QGIS support. So it's something you want to keep in mind. But if you want to get started, it's a great tool to have in the toolkit. And even if you're using it alongside other, kind of traditional GIS tools or things like ArcGIS, I know plenty of teams that use both for different things in different times. Now we jump up to enterprise, and again, these problems that I talked about with the small teams kind of get amplified at the enterprise level. You absolutely want to have some data centralization or control, be it if you're storing the data in a central database in a data warehouse, you're using processing tools like Apache, Sedona, or Whereabouts, whatever that is, you want to make sure that you also have ways to kind of store that and use it as a visualization or editing front end, but you're also connecting into other systems. So I think it's still a valid and very useful tool, especially if you want to test out an idea, do a small project, see what other people are working on, anything like that. But again, the sharing becomes more difficult if there's more people there, as well as the data connectivity. So for personal projects, pretty much a 5, and then for one-off projects, I give it a 4.5. And they're pretty essential for those two things. For small teams, I give it a 4. Like again, you have to start thinking about the data infrastructure pieces that get set up alongside of that. But even to enterprises, I'll give it like a 3.5. I would give it a 4, but I know that the problems listed in the small teams segment just get amplified when you go up to a larger team. So I'm gonna give it a 3.5, even though I probably would have given it a 4. Long story short, you can use it at any stage at any point in time. It is really versatile and allows you to do so much within it. Now, how do you actually use QGIS? You can go ahead and head to qgis.org, download it. It will pick the right system for your computer and install it. Once you've done that, you have installed QGIS successfully, and you can start by loading data in. Generally, you want to start with some basic spatial data, things like shapefiles or GeoJSONs, maybe some cloud-optimized geotiffs to start, just to see what you want to pull in there. I recommend going to like an open data store. Many cities and municipalities have open data stores, so that's a great place to get started to actually find some open data that you can start to use, and you can pull that in and start to create some basic maps. Now, there's a ton to learn. This is not a video about how to learn QGIS, but there's everything from creating the map, publishing it. You can publish print maps, all this different stuff. Once again, check that tutorial that I had earlier in the video that goes through kind of everything you can do in QGIS and get started from there. Now, once you've loaded that data in, you might want to do some analysis, and you can use the processing toolbox to go ahead and do this. There's tools from the processing toolbox, from GRASS. You can do spatial joins, buffers, and intersections. I recommend doing those like as one-offs, and then trying to actually do some other things like exporting your data, maybe creating a map. You can create simple web maps as well. Even go as far as to create a modeled analysis using some of the model builder steps and things like that. Now from there, you can extend this with plugins. You can pull in QGIS to Web, which is a plugin. There's machine learning integration tools. There's thousands of plugins, so I cannot list all of them. Go ahead, and what you basically have to do is go into QGIS. There's a tab for plugins that will install the current plugins library that are listed, and then you can kind of see what's there and see what you want to play with. Then finally, like I said, once you get into these more advanced levels, you want to integrate with other tools, maybe things like PostGIS or DuckDB, producing data from pipelines. Maybe that's in Python or Apache Sedona or Sedona DB, whatever that is. You can start to integrate with your other workflows. So build everything around. QGIS is kind of your center console, your place to go to connect to all these things. Now, no tool is perfect, and in this section, we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls. Then the main pitfalls are going to be performance on big data. QGIS runs on the compute, or the CPU, or basically the processing power of your computer. So however powerful your computer is, that's how powerful QGIS is going to be. It's not meant to handle, and when I say handle, visualize or analyze like even tens or hundreds or millions of features, right? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, sorry, I should clarify that. And that memory limit on your computer will apply. So if you try to cram too much data into it, you'll see this spinning wheel of death, depending on what that looks like on your computer, and basically it will stop working. So you need to be aware of that limit, and that's where other tools, like I mentioned before, either in Python or in SQL, can help you, kind of get around those limits and do some of those processing in other places. Now, another pitfall is on the plugins, right? These plugins are community maintained. And while the QGIS project itself is incredibly stable, some of the plugins, like the quality might vary, they might be outdated, they might not work with the current version, they may not be maintained well, you might hit errors. So you just have to be aware of that it's not like perfect. Once again, an advantage of a system or a company that maintains that is that they kind of are putting their quality stamp on that. Even though it's not perfect, an advantage of like having a central company like Esri kind of maintain some of these things, is that they're kind of putting their stamp of approval on it. Even though it's not perfect, and there's plenty of reasons why that is, you at least have to be aware of like on plugins, some will work, some will not, and just something to be aware of that. Now, again, there's also limits on like the volume of data. I mentioned that for a number of features, but also for raster data. It will work on like simple raster processing, but if you need to either visualize or process large amounts of that data, you're better off moving that either into Python or maybe some tools with GDAL or Xarray, depending on what you want to do there. Those are Python tools, and I'll try to get into some of those in a future video, but effectively there are data limits, right? It's only as powerful as your computer is, and that's something to be aware of. And finally is the learning curve. Like there's a ton to learn here. If it's your first time, kind of interacting with the interface, you'll see that there is a ton to learn. There's great books on this topic. We'll talk about that in the resources section, but it's powerful and it can be overwhelming, right? And that's one thing to just kind of be aware of. It's the same thing when you're approaching like ArcGIS for the first time. There's so many things you can do and menus and buttons and stuff. Just be aware of that. And it's something that you will have to kind of get used to and know where the core things that you need to use are within the platform. Now let's talk about when not to use QGIS, and the limitations really fall into two categories. The first is around the data, and the second is around the publishing or sharing of information. Now let's look at the one around sharing, right? When I talk about sharing, that is both around sharing data and publishing and sharing maps. For sharing data, implementing something like a database like PostGIS or other databases is a great way to solve this, because if that's in a cloud and you give people the right permissions and access to that data, they can immediately just connect QGIS to that database and they're connected in. I show that in this video here so you can actually see what that looks like. So it's a very easy way to get started around sharing data and making sure everyone has everything that's up to date. Plus you can implement permissions and stuff like that in the database, which is a separate video than this. On the same token, QGIS has limitations around publishing. You can create and share a print map, but publishing a web map becomes a little bit more difficult. Now there's great tools and plugins that allow you to do this. A good example of this is Felt, where you can basically take a project in QGIS, push it into their cloud platform and create web maps that way. And then there's other functionality there. And then if you want to sync those up, it's very easy to do. So you need to kind of account for those different things. Now there are like servers. There's something called QGIS server for like web mapping and things like that. I generally don't use that. It kind of follows the model of ArcGIS, which has the ArcGIS desktop and then an ArcGIS server. And the server kind of creates these web layers and the web layers go somewhere else. You can kind of skip all of this now with a modern workflow and just connect it into something like Felt. Basically it goes from, QGIS to Felt, and then your map is there and you're ready to go. Carries over styling. There's kind of no need to like add in extra steps here. If you really want to, you can do that, but that's just to call that out for that. It's a different model than like the ArcGIS plus ArcGIS server plus ArcGIS online. I know I said ArcGIS like 7 times there, but so be it. Now, if you need to do like large scale data processing, I recommend using things like moving it into Python or spatial SQL workloads like Apache Sedona, Sedona DB, even DuckDB for like smaller workloads. You can do all of those things and have a lot of power there, and then take the data that comes out of that and move that back into QGIS when you need. Same thing like I mentioned for raster workflows. GDAL is a really great tool for that, and there's other like cloud native raster engines that you can use, things like Xray, Rasterio and Python. Even Apache Sedona again has raster functionality that you can do here as well. And then anytime like real time pipelines, that's another tricky topic, but QGIS is really focused on using like data sets that exist that are static. Real-time pipelines are not exactly where you want to go with that. Now, even with all those limitations, it's still one of the most widely used desktop GIS tools that's out there, and it's one of the best in class. So while there are limitations, it makes up for that with the connectivity in the ecosystem that's built around it. Now, where can you learn more? Now, there's a few different places. There's a QGIS official documentation that you can see here, as well as an official training manual, which is a really good resource to get started. There's lots of different YouTube tutorials, including mine, which you can see here, and I have a few others in a QGIS playlist that you can actually go in and check out. I would also check out the QGIS plugin repository, which you can see a lot of different things here. And there's an amazing book from a publisher called Locate Press that has a ton of information in it. I definitely recommend checking that book out. It's a really great resource to help you get started with QGIS, and then you can do all those different things. If you're particularly interested in integrating QGIS plus spatial SQL, you can also check out my book because it goes in deep into spatial SQL and uses QGIS as the visualization platform for that. And again, you can always search the web. GIS Stack Exchange is a great place to start. You can look for the QGIS tag and search things there, but it's a really great way to get started. So I hope that was helpful to explain where QGIS fits within the larger geospatial ecosystem. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask it down in the comments. And as always, I'd love to hear how you are using QGIS. Drop a comment below, let me know how you're using QGIS, and subscribe for future tutorials and things like that.